As a podcaster, you should kind of be a journalist, meaning you should be doing the research. You should be understanding your subject matter expertise. You should be understanding your niche, understanding the audience. Like, these are all things that journalists and media companies do. As a podcaster, you're the editor, you're the sound designer, you're the videographer if there's video, you're the graphic designer, you're the copywriter, you're the marketing specialist, you're the audience engagement, you're the community builder, you're the newsletter writer. You see how we are still going? Because I could keep going. Hey guys, welcome to another episode of the Podcast Trapper. I'm your host, Anna Agogo, founder of Black Pod Collective, Black Pod Festival, and Adode Media. Yep, I cover all spaces of podcasting, from a podcast community, podcast conference, to a full-service podcast production agency with an accompanying podcast studio. I know, all things podcasting, right? And as you know, on this podcast, I really share the behind the scenes of the podcast industry, my hot takes, as well as, industry insights. I love the behind the scenes of how they built things and having other people on the show to kind of talk about their journeys as well. This week, I am discussing I don't feel like this is a hot take. This is more of advice. Hot takes are advice. So let's go with it. My hot take on how to turn your podcast into a media brand. Yes, I said it. I do think that we are media conglomerates. We are big time. Want to be a baller, shot caller, 20-inch rim. That's how I think of us. Podcasting is not just people getting on a mic talking big nonsense. No, if you're looking at turning your podcast into a media company, in essence, what I've already done, let's go ahead and dive on in real quick. First, let's kind of talk about why this is even important. I know oftentimes it's like, girl, Anna, you do a lot. I have no desire to do the things that you've done, so let me be clear. And guess what? That's okay too. But let's kind of take it back a little bit. I think when we think of media companies, we start thinking a little too lofty. And to start off with, why aren't podcasts as individual entities already a media conglomerate, a media brand? And let's kind of break this down a little bit further than that. As a podcaster, you should kind of be a journalist, meaning you should be doing the research. You should be understanding your subject matter expertise. You should be understanding your niche, understanding the audience. Like, these are all things that journalists and media companies do. As a podcaster, you're the editor, you're the sound designer, you're the videographer if there's video, you're the graphic designer, you're the copywriter, you're the marketing specialist, you're the audience engagement, you're the community builder, you're the newsletter writer. You see how we are still going? Because I could keep going. You do so many things for this podcast, but you're not treating it as if it's a media company. But you do all the things of a media brand. Look it up really quickly. What does a media company do? What is it that a media company focuses in on? Adode Media, which has the name media in it. Adode Media, we focus and we are a full-service podcast production agency helping brands, organizations, and small businesses utilize a podcast as their main content generation, their main digital marketing generator. How is that any different than your brand and your podcast? So if we start reframing our thought process about the things that we do, it changes how, one, we show up, two, how we treat the things that we do, and three, how we enforce for other people to treat what we do. So let me explain what I mean by this. As a brand and as a media company, you have to have certain systems and policies and procedures in place. For me with Adode Media, let me not say I couldn't. I chose not to just get started without having clear understanding of the market, clear understanding of who my target audience was, clear understanding of the challenges and the needs of my potential customers, clear understanding of the copy that I had on my website, the design, clear understanding of what I needed from a team. And let me kind of explain and use myself as an example. If I was creating a podcast studio, not the production agency side, but the studio side, which if you don't know, the studio came after the production agency. So we were first producing podcasts, then we opened a studio. If I chose to just go the studio route of working with independent creators, underground artist, whatever the case may be, I would have less rules here. That's just the truth of it. I have a lot of rules, like don't show up high. And I know, such a weird thing to ask for people to come to work sober. But in the creative space, it's a wild thing to request. And that's the thing. Like when you're creating something, you know the audience that you have in mind, which for me has always been brands, corporations, and businesses. Well, with that being the audience in mind, we have to operate in a certain manner. We have to show up in a certain way. Customer service has to be a certain way. And don't worry, I'm still working on that, but I think I've gotten better. What you say, Matthew? You think I've gotten better? Matthew's nodding his head. I wish he would say something so you guys could hear him so you don't think that I'm just saying this on my own. You want to tell the people out loud?
She's getting better. A lot better. So we're working on it.
As I said, Matthew is the much calmer of the dynamic duos here at the studio. And so it's one of those things of you have to keep your audience in mind. Well, when you're building your podcast, you have to do the same thing. Like the things that you have to do for a media agency and a media company is the same thing you have to do for a podcast. This has a lot to do with why when I made the transition from independent podcaster to Adode Media, full service podcast production agency, it was not as hard as I thought it would be. The things that were hard had nothing to do with the actual business, but more so to do about my quirkiness and my personality and kind of just understanding a studio. But the production part of it, I already edited podcasts with my own. I already did show notes. I already understand the release schedule. I already reached out to guests. Like I already did all the things for myself. So when I had to put it into a package, understand the complexity, understand like if it's a hard thing to do to then put into a package for clients, it was a no-brainer. And so that's why I say your podcast isn't just this thing that you do. Yes, it could be a hobby if you don't want to go into freelance work, because I'm all for living soft life. I don't know what that means yet because I don't live a soft life. I live a very hard life because I work a lot. But when I think of like soft life and like being able to not monetize every single hobby that you have, I want to remind you, it's okay to not monetize jack squat about your podcast. It doesn't have to be a brand. It could just be something you do for fun. But if you know that you want to utilize this as a portfolio, you want this to be something that's taken seriously, you have to treat it as such. Your podcast is a media powerhouse. There's a copywriting division. That's your show notes. That's your blogs. There's a audio division. That's the audio, the sound design. Like there's guest outreach, so that's your coordinator. Like these are the elements and the departments within a podcast production agency and a media brand. And you're probably thinking to yourself, Anna, why is it even important for me to do this and think of my podcast in a different light? Well, let me explain that. I'm so happy that you asked. I'm here to share some more because this is Anna's Hot Takes. And so on this hot take, let's kind of dive in one step further. Let's take it another layer. I believe wholeheartedly how you treat your brand, how you treat the things you do, also emphasizes how other people treat it. How you show up in the world and tell people to treat you is the same way that they choose to. So it's the same concept with your podcast, but go one step further than that. Oftentimes, we start things off scrappy, which is great. Not my strong suit because I'm a perfectionist. But if you remember Black Pot Collective's Instagram page, I started off with these black boxes and white text with a small Canva logo in the corner because that's all I knew how to do. It was sufficient. It did good for the time. But as I researched and as I learned and as I figured out what worked best for each platform and what resonated better, we made different ideations. So from 2019 all the way to now 2023, our brand has evolved. Our brand evolution has been glorious. I mean, I don't have to wait for y'all to tell me. I know because we've put in the work. We treat Black Pot Collective not just as this thing that we were doing. I've treated it from day one as if it's something I want to take seriously as an Instagram page. But then as I started seeing traction, I started treating it as something different. But when we aren't focused in on the fact that, hey, how I go about growing this thing is by looking at the ideations and what it can be and treating it like a media brand. And researching the media industry because that's been here a lot longer. There's a lot more fails, a lot more books, a lot more things that are not just how to start a podcast. When you start looking at those type of details to understand what goes into this, it makes life a little bit easier for you in what you're building. And when you're building a media agency, there's the immediacy. Huh. I think saying media agency and immediacy. Whew. Wanting it right away. I sound like an expert sometimes, and then sometimes I can't say simple words, and that's just my truth. Well, the immediacy of wanting it right away. And if you can't have it right away, you can sometimes feel like, okay, should I be doing this? But I think podcasting is set up that way because we see in the past, which I'm low-key happy that this is dying down, you see where brands are shelling out millions of dollars, and the way people just assume that that means that this is coming for me too. And I don't want to discourage you. It could be. I don't know. But the statistics aren't there. And so with this in mind, when you think of something as a media brand, you think of the time it takes to build that. You think of what goes behind the scenes and you do the legwork versus where podcasting, I think one of our downfalls is we've made it seem like it's this thing that you can get rich tomorrow, baby. I should be rich already. We launched in January. Matthew, we should be rolling in dough over here, 100,000 bills. That is not the case. And so that's where thinking about your mindset about something changes the trajectory, changes how you treat it, changes how you feel about it, and changes how you position it. If we started looking at it that way, we wouldn't just be so excited anytime we get the littlest of opportunities. And I have been guilty of this as well. So let me be clear, this is not me shaming you for saying, oh my God, why didn't you ask for more? And in a season where like coaches and everybody else is saying, ask for what you deserve, charge your price and then some. Well, baby, if I don't know what the price, I don't know where the floor is at to know where the ceiling is. Ooh, that was good. I just got real deep on y'all. And it's those type of things. So it's understanding like maybe we are mirroring ourselves in the wrong way. And maybe we need to start asking ourselves what really goes into this. So for me, when you're thinking of how to position, because you're like, okay, Anna, you've convinced me I should position myself as a media company. Where the heck do I start? What's the first thing? Well, I'm so happy to tell you, you've already done the work. If your podcast is live already, you've done the work. But let's take it one step further. So many podcasters don't even have a website. They don't have a cohesive brand. They don't have brand colors. They don't have a typography. You don't have the patterns or any of those things. So first and foremost, create a brand. Create a toolkit, a brand toolkit that has your logo, your primary logo, your submark logo, your wordmark logo, your color palette, your patterns that you utilize, your font. That's your brand toolkit. This way, anytime that something is being created for your brand, for your media company, somebody knows how to treat it. With Adode Media, Black Pod Collective, Black Pod Festival, Podcast Trapper, anytime that I'm having a partnership with someone, anytime that I'm creating something with someone, I can give them this brand toolkit to say, hey, utilize this for the information you need. It's a different experience. I'm not trying to wing it of like, oh, here's this. No, here is everything in one toolkit. So that's the first thing. Figure out what your brand assets are. The next thing is have a cohesive website. Having a 1 page is sufficient. 2 pages may be better. 3 pages even good. 5 is where it's at. I'm feeling myself today. I think it's low-key I'm tired, so maybe I should be tired more often. And it's those things. Like having a website to where people can find who you are, find your episodes, and readily connect with you. The amount of times that I hear brands, which I'm not saying that they're correct for this, so let me make sure I say that. There's Google. There's no reason you shouldn't know how to find Black creatives. But the amount of times brands are like, I just don't know where to find the information. And I get it sometimes. There are times that I'm looking for something on a particular show. I have to go to your Instagram and then I have to search. I'm tired already just trying to find it. So having everything in one centralized place, whether that's your media kit, that's your how people can book you for speaking, do you have a newsletter, having it all in one place. And I know Linktree has done a really good job of that, but that professionalism matters. So we've talked about, having a cohesive brand, having your branding elements, branding assets. We've talked about a website, but also in how you position yourself. This means you can't just have every single guest that doesn't resonate with your audience. You have to be a good steward over the audience in which has blessed you with the ability to listen to your content. That's how I look at it. Every time somebody tunes in, I feel blessed because it's like, y'all have 50 million, I know there's more, don't come for me, podcasts that you could be tuning into, and you chose to tune into mine. Like, I feel special. It makes me feel good. And so I want to make sure I'm a good steward over your time, because I know these 15, 20 minutes and sometimes 45, but hey, that's only when we have guests. I know that those make a difference. And so being a good steward over your audience looks like, don't just let anybody on the mic. It looks like being prepared for the conversation. And I'm not saying you have to have a whole script. I don't do scripting. Sometimes I have a bullet point over here, but it's about knowing that you came to the conversation prepared. You came to the conversation ready to talk. This also helps you in your pitch. So if we stop pitching ourselves as independent creators, because I do sometimes think that when people see that, they see that we don't have any money. And it's true, we don't. But that's not the point. They don't need to know that we're secretly broke. Instead, if you're saying, hey, I am the founder of X, Y, and Z Media Company. We produce this show, and this show is about X, Y, and Z. This is the host, and this is what we do. We're looking to partner with somebody as such as your brand in these capacities. This is what we're looking to bring to the table, how it can be advantageous to you, how it can be advantageous to us. You see how that's a different conversation than I need a little bit of money because I'm trying to, make something shake. Hopefully that's not how y'all are reaching out to brands, because that would be wild if it is. But I just want to kind of give that as an example, because we have to go beyond the surface. We have to show that we've actually done that groundwork. And those three things, something as simple as your branding, as your wording and your positioning, the same thing with events. So many events give away press passes for free. And we as podcasters don't even realize that we are press. And that's the problem. Why do you think there's this whole thing about authors going on podcast tours, business owners paying $10,000 to be on certain people's podcasts? And yes, that really does happen. Not me, but I can only be so lucky one day. And so that's the thing to keep in mind. People are investing this money because we are press. We are free press. Do you know how much it costs for a commercial on TV? I don't know either, but I know it's expensive, at least for the Super Bowl. And that's the thing. Spending money to get in front of audiences is a thing of the past. Now all they have to do is pitch to be a guest on your show. And you're not seeing the value that you are bringing. So many of us are just so excited that somebody agreed to be on our show because we think that we cannot exist without the guest, and that is not true. The studies show that people tune into shows for the host, for the relationship they've built with you. You don't need anybody else if you don't want them. But we have to stop being so eager. Like, oh my God, this person agreed to be on my show. So no. You've created the platform. You've created the brand. You've done the work. Start treating it as such. Start treating it as press. Start treating it as its own media entity, because that is what it is. It is a media outlet. If somebody launched a radio station tomorrow, you wouldn't be like, that's not media. They launched a whole radio station. It's the same thing with a podcast. Just because the barrier of entry is lower does not make the value of what we do any less. And I feel like that's where I dropped the mic. So I hope you guys enjoyed this conversation, and I hope you will actually kind of take heed to see how you can utilize the content that I've shared to turn your own podcast into its own media entity. As always, thank you guys for tuning in. You can follow me on all platforms at Anna Agogo. My website, my socials, my Twitter, you name it, you can find me there. And until next week, y'all have a good one and keep trapping nothing but new.